I was an IV drug user. I became an IV drug user, and that was the thing I said I would never do. That's when you know it's bad, and I would never do that. So I'm okay until I did.
Until you weren't. Before we get started with our episode, we're going to hear from our sponsor. Shopify makes it easy to manage your growing business. They help with all the details like shipping, taxes, payments, all from one single dashboard. Their powerful social media tools help you connect all of your channels so that you can make shoppable posts everywhere that people scroll. With Shopify, your first sale is much closer than you think. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/Rebecca. All lowercase letters. Go to shopify.com/Rebecca to start selling with Shopify today. Now let's get started with this week's episode. Well, Tiffany, I really appreciate you being here. Like, I know I said this already, but I'm going to say it on camera now. I've been so excited about this episode because I think it's so important, and I think this is just really something that people really need to hear and normalize and accept is a part of life and impacts so many people. Yeah. Like, you talk a lot online about your issue with substance abuse and your road to recovery, and I am going to stop rambling in a moment.
You're not rambling.
Because I ramble all the time. But I just really wanted to, like, praise you first. Because as a former teacher, I've seen some crazy things, whether it's with kids or with their parents. And I just cannot tell you how much this episode means to me.
Aww,
like, seriously.
That makes me so happy.
I think it's so important, and so I'm gonna give the floor to you. And I want to hear everything that you feel comfortable sharing from the beginning, how it started, how you decided you needed help, and kind of what that looked like for you. So go right ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am in recovery. November 26th, I celebrated 12 years, drug and alcohol free.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It has been a long road for sure. When I first started using drugs, I was ignorant in a way. It's like we didn't have cell phones in our pockets. And so it wasn't, I thought drug addicts were people who did hard drugs under bridges and didn't have homes. At the time, I was captain of the cheerleading squad. My stepdad was a cop. Like,
it could never be you.
It could never be me, ever.
What's actually I feel like even today with cell phones, people still don't understand, sometimes until it's too late. Because I'll never forget this moment when I was teaching freshmen. And I taught social studies. You know, we used to do the CNN 10 at the beginning of every class to look at current events. And I loved for my kids to know what was going on in the world. And I remember there was a segment where they talked about vaping and vapes. And I don't remember the exact number, so I'm going to say it wrong. So, like, don't come for me. But I just remember them saying that, like, a pod for a vape had maybe the equivalent of 12 cigarettes. Maybe that number's wrong. I don't remember exactly, but it was a lot.
That's bad.
It was a lot. As much nicotine, like so much nicotine. And I just remember some of the looks on my kids' faces. And some of them just turned to me and they're like, vapes have nicotine in them? And I was like,
no.
Yes. What?
They didn't know.
And they had no idea. And some of them looked so panicked. And I'm like, not that this would apply to you, because of course you guys would never do that.
Right.
But, you know, why do you think you feel like you need your vape all the time? That's what that is. And immediately, like, so much of my class immediately looked so panicked. And that's when I was like, oh, this is a problem. Like, I knew it was a problem in the younger generation. I didn't have a visual until, like, that moment of how severe it was.
I will be so honest with you. I vape.
No, you're an adult. You're a grown adult, and you understand what that means, and that's your choice. Absolutely.
Yeah, I definitely traded in one addiction for another, because I was smoking cigarettes, and then I was dipping Copenhagen like a crazy person.
Wow.
And yeah, it was not cute. I would just have like a big lip, and I'd be spitting into a tent. For 2 years, I did that.
Wow.
Yeah, really unattractive. And then I went to vaping, and I justify it like, okay, I'm not doing crack. Like, it could be so much worse.
If it's the safer option, like, you're going to go with the safer option. And absolutely, 100%.
New Year's of this year, I quit vaping, and then I recently relapsed. But I'm a work in progress, and that's the overreaching message here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We are all works in progress. And I think it's wonderful. And you're so right. Like, it's when you have been so far on the edge of the extreme of one side where it's like dangerous. If you can find ways to cope and not go back to that extreme, like I'm all for that.
Yeah.
100%. Like you do what you got to do to survive, and that is what it is.
Right. And it's one of those things, you know, in your heart it's bad. You know, you need to stop. You know what it's doing to you, but it's like, but I don't want to yet.
Yes,
I'm
I
not
can
ready.
when I'm ready.
I could quit if I wanted.
So
I just don't want to.
you were in high school when you started.
I was.
Uh-huh.
I was straight A's. I captain of the cheerleading squad.
Wow.
I was a really good kid. The thing was, I felt so anxious all the time, and I had no clue what anxiety was or depression or anything like that. And so I would worry about things that other kids weren't worrying about. Like I'd be at school worrying that my mom was at home dying, or I'd be worrying that
Oh no.
something would happen to me and we'd have to ride an ambulance and we wouldn't have money for it. Just excessive worry.
Such an American worry. I can't afford to ride in the
I
ambulance.
know. I know.
So
It's
sad.
so real though.
It's so sad. Go ahead. Sorry.
Like I will walk. My arm is dangling up, but I will walk this out.
That's so
I'm not going to
sad.
risk it. I know.
We laugh so we don't cry. It's
Exactly.
fine.
It's tough. And that's the kind of stuff, like as a kid, I was worried about. And so I never really felt peace. I never really felt like I fit in anywhere. I had grown up being overweight and getting made fun of a lot. So that's where the sense of humor came in. I started telling jokes about myself to kind of deflect.
Yeah.
And with that came a really low self-esteem. Like I said it so much to myself that I started to believe it and kind of adopted this idea that I was the tallest, biggest, weirdest, loudest kid in the class. When I was first introduced to alcohol and somebody offered me a sip, I had always said no up until that point. But for some reason on this night, I said yes. And that sip of alcohol just changed my life forever, because instantly, as soon as it entered my bloodstream, I felt numb. I felt nothing. I felt so chill. And it was the first time that there was quiet in my mind.
Wow.
And I chased it. And I chased it so quickly that within 3 months of taking that first sip, I completely dropped out of high school.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, my parents were so confused. They're like, you were just a star student and now you're dropping out. Like, it was really tough, but school no longer interested me. Feeling my normal self no longer interested me. I wanted to feel numb. I wanted to block it out. I wanted to have fun. So I started skipping school, hanging out with older kids who were drinking, and then the drinking, as it does, escalated. I began smoking marijuana, and then I was introduced to my drug of choice, which was opiates. And it was right around the time I was 20 years old, and my friend handed me a pill, and when she handed it to me, she wasn't like, here, take this, but just so you know, it's going to like destroy everything you've ever known and burn every bridge, and it's going to turn you into a maniac.
Yeah.
She was like, take this, you're going to love it. And I was like, okay,
I trust my friends.
give it. And it's not her fault. I could have researched, but I was so in the mindset of anything to make me feel different. I was just grasping at straws, trying to cope with life on life's terms and being numb. So anyway, I took this pill and she was right. I did love it. I loved it so much that I never wanted to be without it. It made me feel numb. It made me feel calm. And they were like $15 a piece per pill.
Wow.
At the time, yeah. And it was so expensive, but I understood why, because it made me feel okay with life. And so it started off fun. Me and my friend would do it. We would split one. And then eventually I started buying them myself. And then eventually I started hiding the fact that I was buying so many and I was snorting them. And then my mom got sick. She was 46 years old and they diagnosed her with lung cancer and she died like 5 months later.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
It was super quick. It's okay, thank you. But I used that as an excuse to escalate my addiction. And so I was like, I can't cope with not having her, so I'm gonna just get high. But then I found out I was getting a trust fund from her.
Oh.
And I knew that if I got that money, I would die. I would spend it on drugs. And so I admitted out loud to the people in charge of the trust fund that I had an issue, and they sent me to rehab in 2009. I went to rehab because I felt like it's what my mom would have wanted. I felt like it's the right thing to do. I didn't want to go. And that's why it didn't work.
Got it.
I was defiant the entire time. I thought I knew more than everybody did. I thought my problem was specifically the pills, and if they could just teach me to not want the pills, I would be fine. And so when they told me I couldn't smoke or I could never drink alcohol again, I couldn't comprehend a life without that. It just seemed too impossible. And so the night that I graduated from the rehab, my roommate and I celebrated by going to the store and getting stuff to make my favorite drink and drinking. Like,
Oh,
congrats on the
no.
graduation.
Was
That's how I
partying it up.
celebrated. Yeah.
Oh no.
But I thought it was fine. I thought it was fine. I was like, as long as I'm not snorting
On
pills,
those pills, yeah.
I'm good.
Yeah.
And it was good for a little while. And I managed to stay away from them. I even got into a relationship with a deputy sheriff.
Wow.
And I was like, this is perfect. This is what I need to not do drugs. I can't relapse if I'm with a cop.
Yeah.
But addiction doesn't care who you're dating. Addiction doesn't care what you want,
Doesn't care who you are.
what your plans are. Doesn't matter. It's so insidious. And when I was offered my drug of choice again at work and I took it, I knew that meant the end of my relationship. But it was just so strong, the pull to do it. And so I did it. And I went over to his house to tell him and break up with him. But he didn't notice that I was high.
Oh.
He had no clue. And I was so confused because I thought he was like a professional high person spotter. You know what I mean? Like, that's what
You're a cop, but
Yeah.
what do you mean?
But I think when love is involved, it kind of muddies up the water a little bit.
Well, not only that, I think, and I say this like as a former teacher, I think people always assume that people who are in specific professions have to be perfect in specific ways all the time or experts in specific things all the time, and that's just not the case. Like, we're all
Right.
people. We all are here to do the job. We all have training. Fun fact, whether it's cop training, teacher training, like, it's not the best here. Like, we don't have the funding or the resources to get the kind of training that we need. So, like, that doesn't surprise me.
And I'm also so sure that when he's not at work,
He doesn't have the
turns
same.
that off.
Yeah, exactly.
So he's not on
He's not
patrol.
suspicious of everybody in his life all the time.
Right.
He's not at work.
And so that was when I realized, like, holy crap, I can have my cake and eat it too. I can keep up appearances, like I'm doing the right thing. I'm with a police officer. I'm not a drug addict anymore, but I could still have a little fun on the side.
Oh, no.
And I ended up hiding my drug addiction from him for 2.5 years.
Wow. How did he find out? If you're not comfortable talking
Oh,
about that,
I'm
that's okay.
comfortable.
Okay.
It's in a book. Everybody knows.
Okay. okay.
It is out there.
Oh, gosh.
So I was living a secret life. I would
Right.
wake up every day, and my first thought was, how can I die without causing a big scene to be cleaned up? Because I couldn't escape my addiction, and I couldn't escape the reality I'd created for myself. And then my second thought was, how can I get money to get drugs so that I can keep up this charade another day? Because if I didn't have them, I would be sick.
Okay.
My body became dependent
The
on
withdrawals,
them.
yeah.
And so I can only have the flu so many times per week before things start getting suspicious. So I felt in order to keep up this lie, in order to keep my boyfriend in the house and everything, I had to not be sick. And with that level of desperation comes a drop in morals and a drop in your values. And I began stealing.
Wow.
I began taking things from around the house. First, I pawned all my stuff. And then I slowly started taking some of his things and pawning them.
Wow.
They were things I didn't think he would notice.
Like what? We're going to take a quick break and hear from our sponsor. It's 2025, and a new year means new opportunities. For a lot of y'all out there, I know you've been thinking about one thing over the holidays, and that's starting your own business. But you probably also have a lot of questions. How do I get started? How do I come up with a brand? How do I sell stuff to people? And what am I even going to sell? Take a deep breath, because Shopify's got you. Shopify makes it easy to manage your growing business. They help with all the details like shipping, taxes, payments, all from one single dashboard, which allows you to actually focus on the important stuff like starting and growing the business. Their powerful social media tools help you connect all of your channels so that you can make shoppable posts everywhere that people scroll. With Shopify, your first sale is much closer than you think. Established in 2025. Has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/Rebecca. All lowercase letters. Go to shopify.com/Rebecca to start selling with Shopify today. Now, back to the episode.
Like fishing poles and tools. And like I would go in with the intention of getting these items back.
Right.
Because you can buy them back from the pawn
Yes.
shop, which I thought was such a cool idea at
Yeah.
first. But I didn't realize you never actually go back to get the stuff. And so I would pawn things that I didn't think you would notice
For a while.
for a while.
Okay, that makes sense.
For
It's like
a
a fishing pole. I would notice this fishing
Yeah, he
pole.
had so many friggin' fishing poles though. Like,
Okay, that makes sense. That makes
yeah,
sense.
and I justified it in my sick head. I was like, I live here too, so technically that's my Dremel tool also.
Okay.
Technically that's my car cover. Like what, like I don't even know what I was stealing, but I would go into the pawn shop and be like, here's a 2000 volt Dremel tool that's mine. That I
totally
own.
mine.
Yeah.
This is my thing. I know what it is. I know what it does.
Then I'm willing to sell it for the right price. And just to be clear, there's like nothing funny about what I did. It was
It's copium.
yeah.
You laugh so you don't cry.
It's trauma.
No, absolutely.
Okay, good.
No, yes, correct.
Okay, as long as
Yes.
we're on the same page.
Side note, just so you understand, we're on the same page. I was in a real code red lockdown when I was a high school teacher.
Whoa.
There was not a drill. We were all literally in the cafeteria, so kids didn't even know where to go. Like, who trains for a fire drill or practices for a fire drill starting in the cafeteria?
Right.
It's lunchtime.
Right.
And everyone was so panicked. And people look at me like I'm crazy now because I'll make the comment of, yeah, I didn't know what to do, man. So I found some teacher shears and I put them in between my knuckles and I was ready to Wolverine it up.
Yeah.
And they're like, that's not funny. And I'm like, I don't know how to explain to you. I have to cope with the actual fear that I had
Right.
in that moment of I might need to kill somebody to protect these kids.
Right.
And I'm 5 foot tall, 110 pounds, man. I don't like what. Of course, I'm gonna cope with it with humor.
Right.
Like, what do you expect me to do? Just sit in the corner and cry about it?
Yeah,
No.
I'm the worst. I'm at a funeral, like saying inappropriate stuff, like to
People cope.
ease the tension.
Sometimes when we're learning about like really difficult things in social studies class, because I taught world history, I taught American history, there's a lot of really heavy things, whether we're talking about slavery or the Holocaust. There's very often kids that really can't deal with the seriousness, and they don't crack a joke because they actually think it's funny. They're just so uncomfortable.
Right.
Or so,
That was
it's like,
me.
yeah, don't worry about it. You are not going to throw me off at all.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure, and not that I'm getting better about not necessarily worrying so much about what people think of me, but I do want him and his family specifically to know if they ever see something of me and I'm making a joke, like
Oh, yeah.
it is number one on my bucket list to be able to make amends
Yeah.
to him
Absolutely.
after everything that happened, which I'll get to in a second. But
That's okay.
so I was pawning his things, and then I ended up doing something I never in a million years thought I would do. I started injecting the drugs intravenously.
Oh, wow.
I was an IV drug user. I became an IV drug user, and that was the thing I said I would never do. I'm like, that's a real junkie. If somebody is shooting up, that's when you know it's bad, and I would never do that. So I'm okay until I did.
Until you weren't.
I did, and I'm like, this is amazing. And then I became addicted to the ritual of it, of doing it, and I would shoot up in police substations.
Wow.
Like it was so. I thought I could get away with anything, and I ended up. My drug dealer at the time asked if I could obtain any guns.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and I was like, absolutely, I can. And I traded guns for drugs.
Wow.
Yeah, I put guns into the hands of a drug dealer, which is, in hindsight, now that my brain is back functioning again, it brings me, I've worked through a lot of the guilt and the shame, but I think there's still a little bit of shame there. Like, wow, like the potential of what could have happened
I think it just shows like what drugs can really do to a person. Like people always say, "Oh, couldn't be me," or "I would never," but you really don't understand how the drugs not only blind your morals, but like the pull and the addiction. It's so strong. You do things that you never in a million years thought that you would or were even capable of doing.
Absolutely.
And that's what's so dangerous about these things. Like people, they don't understand that they will make them do heinous things.
Yeah, and I think the part that confuses people is they're like, why don't you just stop? Which I totally get. Valid question.
It's not that easy.
It's a totally valid question, but what happens when your body becomes dependent on it is if you don't have it, it feels like your bones are growing out of your skin. It feels like they're in a vice grip being twisted. It feels like you have the worst flu of your life and you're freezing cold. I would have chosen death gladly over detox.
Wow.
Any day. So to me, those were my options. I could either die or I could find a way to get high because I cannot detox. I just can't. It's so painful. It's unbearable to me. And it felt like I was on fire and the drugs were water to put me out.
Wow.
And so it just went on like that for so long, and I just kept getting deeper into this darkness. And I was living a completely secret life for a really long time. And when I took the guns, he noticed they were missing immediately.
Were they his personal or were they from like the police station?
So that was my bad because I thought they were his personal.
Okay.
One of them was his off-duty weapon.
Got it.
I believe. And so because of that, he noticed it was missing right away.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he
'cause
called
that's
the
a work thing.
police. And I had to put on a show, you know, while they came to do fingerprints and everything. I had to pretend like I had no clue. And they were asking me questions and interviewing me. And I thought I killed the interview. Like, I thought I nailed it. I thought I covered my tracks so well. And then the next morning, they woke me up out of bed and arrested me. And I was charged with 20 felonies.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh.
I saw many felonies. That's
Wow.
Yeah. Don't recommend it to anyone.
No. So
Yeah.
how much time did you have to end up serving?
Well, the first offer that they gave me was 15 years.
Okay.
And I was like, no, thank you.
No.
I'm going to pass on that. And so I ended up, well, what's crazy is when I was in jail, that in itself was a whole experience. Fish out of water until I wasn't out of water. And then I adapted. And then I became like a prison person. Like, it's not prison, it's county jail. But it's weird because you do adapt to your surroundings.
Yeah.
And the drugs left my system in there, obviously. I ended up detoxing on the floor of Suicide Watch because I tried to end my life when I got to jail.
Wow.
Because the pain of the withdrawal was so much, and the pain of the reality of the life that I'd created. Like, it was, I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe I was in jail. I couldn't believe the things I'd done. And when I got there, it was just too much to bear. I didn't care. It wasn't like I wanted to die. I felt like I had to die. I was like, I can't be alive anymore. I'm just not meant to live. I thought I was born by mistake, or I was meant to live a short life and fizzle out and be a lesson about drugs. And so I didn't want to do it anymore. But I ended up detoxing on the floor of Suicide Watch, and the fog cleared, and I found myself laughing again and feeling things again. And it was really interesting for that to occur in jail because it's such a dark place. But to have moments of laughter and camaraderie with people, it was really cool. So anyway, my dad visited me on Christmas and told me that he himself had gotten sober and that I needed to get my SHIT together and go get help so that we could do the recovery thing together as a family. And so I started, I started writing the judges that day and begging for rehab. And so I ended up with 120 days in jail, 6 months rehab, and 3 years of probation.
So is that common for people who are addicted to have sentences reduced in order, like in exchange of going to rehab?
So I don't think it was reduced. From what I understand, their first offer is always crazy.
Okay, like a facility.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
the first offer of 15 years was what they
Oh,
came.
okay, not okay. Like, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I
No, it's
misunderstood.
okay. And then I was like, no, thank you. I think you talk to your lawyer and you tell them yes or no. And then they come back with something else. By the time they came back with something else, I had written probably 20 letters begging to get into a rehab because I knew it was the only way that I was going to change. Like,
Yeah.
jail keeps people locked away from their drugs, sure.
But it
But the
doesn't teach
problem
them
is,
when they're reintroduced. Yeah.
the problem is your brain, dude, and that goes everywhere with you. And so if I wouldn't have gone to rehab, I would have left jail with more drug contacts than
Yeah.
I could have ever dreamed because everybody in there did drugs. Everybody in there knew how to get them. And so I knew I had to go to rehab. And it was the smartest decision I ever made.
How long did you spend there?
6 months
Okay.
in a live-in residential treatment center. And then after that, I had a choice. I could go live with my father or I could go to a halfway house, which is basically a house where a bunch of addicts in recovery go after rehab and jail, and they kind of acclimate to the real world and learn how to live without drugs, but in a safe place where you could be accountable. There's
Yeah.
rules and curfews and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so I made the decision to go to a halfway house. I was ready for freedom, but I knew.
Baby steps. You already
Mm-hmm.
did the, I graduated, haha, I'll get back into the world once before.
Mm-hmm.
It makes sense to baby steps this time, yeah.
Yeah, and the second time I went to rehab for the 6 months, I wanted to be there. I wanted it more
Wow.
than I ever wanted anything. And because of that, I was willing to be open minded and I was willing to listen and absorb stuff like a sponge.
That's what matters.
Mm-hmm.
People can change, but they have to want it
Yes.
first. Whether that comes with addiction or whether that comes with just personality therapy in general. Like, you have to be willing to want it.
Yes, because to overcome an addiction is one of the hardest battles anyone will ever have to face. And if it's a battle you're not even wanting to go into, you're not going to fight with everything you have.
No.
And I did. I was ready. I suited up. I showed up to class. I listened to what people said. I knew everything that I thought was wrong, and I had to go with, like, my first thought was always wrong. My second thought was the logical one. And so my sponsor had told me to do the opposite of what the old me would have done in every single situation, even down to, like, if there's a piece of paper on the floor and the old me would have stepped over it, like, the new me has to bend down and pick it up and throw it away. Like, whatever the opposite of what I used to do was. And that helped me for a little while because I couldn't trust my own thoughts.
Absolutely. So since you've been in the halfway house, did you ever have an issue again where you felt like you were stumbling on your path, or has it been like, I don't want to say perfect because that's not a good word, because
Right.
it is a struggle constantly all the time to battle that illness. But how has it been since you left? Like, did you ever have a relapse again?
I did not have a relapse
Congratulations, that is amazing.
again. Thank you.
I love that.
I think a huge part of that was 2 months after I moved into the halfway house, I got pregnant.
Got it.
That'll
change your perspective on things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They say you're not supposed to be in a relationship for the first year. And I met this guy and he was in another halfway house.
Mm-hmm.
Neither of us had a job. Like, we did not have anything going for us, but we liked each other. And so we got one overnight pass and that was all it took. I found out I was pregnant and I was like, this is terrible news because I don't know how I'm going to take care of a baby. I can't
Much
even
less
take care of myself, dude.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but when I told him about it, he didn't run, which was surprising because
Wow.
I would have for sure if I was him. And he's like, I've got an idea. Let's just get married.
Wow.
Yeah. And so 5 months after knowing each other, we were at the altar with a baby in my stomach. Again, don't recommend this. It worked out okay for us, but because we ended up staying together for 10 years. But yeah, so that was really crazy, and that's a whole story in itself. But we ended up working really hard. I stayed living at the halfway house even though I was pregnant because I still had to learn.
Absolutely.
I wasn't done.
You do what you got to do.
So even though we were married, we lived separately in separate halfway houses and continued working on our stuff, and then eventually moved in together, and my son was born on my birthday.
Oh, that's
Rude.
Adorable. No, I love that though.
It is cute. It is cute. He
I know
did
some people
steal my
hate that,
thunder, for
but
sure.
This might sound so dumb. But like, considering the dark place that you were and how you tried, like, there was a time in your life where you didn't even want to continue.
Mm-hmm.
And so for like the universe to give you
A birthday
a
present.
birthday present like that.
Exactly. The same day.
Like I know some people would hate that, and that's totally fine.
Mhm.
But like to me, that sounds beautiful.
Yeah, cosmically, I think it's very cool. I joke about it being annoying that he stole my thunder, but realistically,
Well, you
I'm
can't ever
not
steal a
celebrating
queen's
it.
thunder. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that.
Also, I'm at the age where I'm okay with
Yeah.
being ignored on my birthday and us not acknowledging the fact that I'm going to be 40 this year.
I'm gonna be 29 this year, and I'm like,
You're going to be what?
29.
Are you saying 29?
Yeah.
You're a child.
I know I am a child.
You-
I have so many questions. I'm trying to organize my brain. So, how many would you? Maybe not how many, but what did a lot of your relationships after you got out of the halfway house look like? Did you have a lot of people? Obviously, your dad was very supportive, which is amazing and wonderful and beautiful. Did you have any other relationships that kind of survived from your past, or was it kind of like really starting over?
It was really like starting over because the only people that I had surrounded myself with prior to that were people who used.
Okay.
And in this new life, I can't be around those people.
Absolutely.
As much as I would love to continue being friends with these people who I've been friends with for so long, being around them I would relapse in 5 seconds. I know that. And that's what my sponsor said to me. She's like, if you hang out at the barbershop long enough, you're eventually going to get a haircut, which is such a cliche thing in the recovery community, but it really stuck with me because I'm like, yeah, wherever I put myself is what I am. And so if I'm around people who are actively using, I will be actively using. So I had to say goodbye to a lot of people, which I thought was going to be a lot harder than it was. But I started making new friends in recovery. And that was when I found out what a friend really was to begin with.
Yeah.
Because people in recovery would show up for me and they would pick me up and take me to a meeting and bring me home. They wouldn't expect gas money or anything in return. They just wanted me to learn to live clean and they were just willing to do it.
That's
And
beautiful.
yeah, that was when I learned the definition of a true friend. And all the people who I was roommates with in the halfway house are my best friends to this day.
Oh, I love
We've raised our children together. We've been to each other's weddings and we still hang out all the time, every week. They're true friends.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what a true friend was. Before it was like, hey, what can you do for me? What can I gain from being around you? My father ended up passing away shortly after my son was
so
born.
sorry.
It's okay. We got to have some incredible, I would have gladly traded the 6 or so months, however many months we had of sobriety for the entire lifetime that we had before, because before that we never really knew each other until we got clean.
I wonder if he knew that he struggled. I wonder if he kind of was worried about you struggling but didn't want to
I wonder.
bring it up. And I wonder if that caused like an issue in that connection of like wanting to get close but not too close and worrying that he might start an issue for you. But then when he realized you had one, he's like, okay, I can... Now I'm not going to cause harm. I'm going to step in and be the dad that she needs me to be right now.
Yeah, and he really was. Like, he was there throughout my childhood. He was the coolest dad ever. Like, but when it was our weekends with him, we'd go to a bar and hang out at the bar because that's where he hung out. Like, if you ask my mom, he was super unreliable and probably a deadbeat. But if you ask me, he was a magical king who made my childhood so much fun. And it's because he was on drugs probably and didn't follow the rules.
Yeah.
And would put mattresses up against the wall and he would like paint murals on our living room wall. One time my mom asked him to clean the carpet because her mom was coming and he spray painted it a different color. Like, that's just the kind of dude he was. He was wild.
Oh, bless.
But he was great. He was wonderful. And if it wasn't for him loving me during a time I felt completely unlovable, and if it wasn't for him having faith in me when I didn't even have faith in myself, I don't think I'd be here.
Oh, my heart's gonna make me cry for a second. Daddy-daughter relationships. So I've received so many stories from people, and what really stood out to me about a lot of these stories is, whenever I tell a podcast story or do a skit, it's always anonymous. I'm never gonna say Kelly from New Jersey, because you never want people to get in trouble for speaking out when a lot of these stories are about professionals who are treated unfairly or anything like that, or you just never want to get anyone in trouble. You don't want anyone to be found out. You know, privacy is important. But I've never received so many submissions that were like, but please don't use my name. And I'm like, oh, I would never do that. But it really just spoke volumes to me, if that makes sense. Like, I don't know if I'm making sense right now. Like that,
I want to understand so bad.
it's like the people who sent in stories about when they were addicted were like, but please don't share
Oh,
who
I didn't
am.
realize people sent you stories.
Always, yes, always.
Why do they send you stories?
I say, hey, these are the episodes that I'm doing. So, but most of my platform, because like we met each other like at Faith's fidget toy thing. So like
Yeah.
we never like saw each other's content or anything like that.
Right.
So I was a social studies teacher, and I was just making the kids laugh during lockdowns, and I started making skits about dumb things they would do in my classroom. And then I started getting, I never planned for it to go anywhere. But then people started liking them. People thought they were funny and silly. And then I started getting stories from teachers that are like, oh, you'll never believe what this kid did, or you'll never believe what this parent said.
Got it.
And so I started making more skits. And then that kind of became my platform, was using storytelling and comedy to kind of raise awareness about issues within public education, or how we're treating teachers, or when kids aren't getting help that they need, or when parents aren't being listened to, or issues within administration. And when I left the classroom, I realized that I could do that with other occupations and jobs also. So I always get people sending me stories of crazy things they've experienced in life or at work. Like the kind of underlying theme is, this is how we're treating people in the world. And it's like, haha, funny, but it's also like, hey, maybe we shouldn't
Interesting.
do
Okay.
this. And so when I do podcast episodes, I just kind of say like, hey, these are the episodes that I'm doing. Here's the theme. If you have an experience that you want me to share, like I would love to, because like I told you before, when I was a social studies teacher, the first step to accepting each other is understanding each other. And I might not have firsthand knowledge on what it's like to be a nurse or in recovery or anything like that, but other people do. And if I can be a mouthpiece for those people
That's awesome.
and share their stories, I want to be able to do that, because I think that's sharing each other's experiences is really the only way that we're going to create understanding in the world. And that's important to me. And if I can like hide it behind a veil of like, it's funny, it's storytelling, or like, you know, just entertainment, fine, that's fine with me. I'll be the funny lady with a watermelon on my head, or I'll be the lady that shares everyone's stories. Like, that's fine. I don't care if it allows me to create like a little bit more understanding in the world each
Absolutely.
day. That's what I care about. That's what I love.
I love that. And you're saying people submit stories about addiction, but they don't want their name on it.
Yeah. So like I get so many stories all the time, like every day. But increasingly, when I said, hey, I'm going to be doing an episode on addiction. If you have an experience or questions, let me know. And I'll try to incorporate what I can. And just about almost every single person, not all, but almost every single person was, here's my story, but please keep it anonymous. And I'm
That's
like,
so sad. I get it
it
though.
broke my heart a little bit, you know what I mean? And I'm like, I always do. I would never do that to you guys, but like, it shows you like I don't want to say desperation. That's not a good word, but like the severity of it.
Yeah, and I think it also shows that in general, we need to do a better job
At normalizing these conversations.
Yes.
'Cause that's the issue. Like so much of an issue is that when people don't feel comfortable talking about it, they also don't feel comfortable asking for help. And that's what could create those spirals. And if we don't offer those lifelines, like how do you ever expect anyone to get back to a normal life or to better themselves? Like one woman sent me a story about how she really suffered from addiction, had to go to rehab, and she had a little girl. And her brother offered that he would take in the little girl and keep her for as long as he needed to, as long as she bettered herself. And so she worked so hard, she worked her butt off, she turned her life around, she went into recovery, she came out of rehab, and she's like, thank you so much, I appreciate that, I'm ready to start my life, like I appreciate you giving me this opportunity. And the brother didn't want to return the girl. And he said, well, can you be trusted with her? Is it safe? And she's like, this is my daughter. I would never put her in a situation. There are people who have oopsies even when they have a child position. It happens. But it was so devastating for her. She's like, I went through this to be the mom that my daughter deserved, and now my brother won't give her back. It's now been 2 years that I've been sober, and she has her daughter now.
Okay.
But her brother is constantly oh, well, she's sick. What did you give her? Did you give her the right medication? Did you mess up? Because I know that you're an addict. And she's like, I'm not an addict anymore.
Right.
I'm in recovery. And it feels like a constant new battle of her having to prove to her family
Yeah.
that she can be a mother.
Mm.
And I do this other series called Am I the Bad Apple? Basically, people send in stories of like situations where they're not sure if they were in the right or in the wrong. And in a lot of stories, we talk about whether it's alcoholism or drug addiction. And I always say that when you have this illness or this disease, your actions are understandable and they're explainable, but they're not justifiable. So like how you treat people when you have these diseases and are struggling with addiction, like it is understandable, it is
Right.
explainable. That doesn't necessarily mean that people have to forgive you. Like the way that
Exactly.
you impact them, it also matters.
Right.
Their experience and their feelings, it's valid, and it's okay if they don't feel comfortable like retaining that relationship with you. And that's fine if that brother did not want to forgive his sister, but at the end of the day, that's her mom.
Right.
That you're not her parent, you're not her guardian. If CPS is saying she's fine, she's safe, like that's not your place to put the pressure on her that potentially could make her fall off the wagon. Like that's not fair to anybody.
Right.
When you're constantly reminding someone of the worst parts of themselves and the worst things they've done, that's not helping them be better. That's
Right.
not helping them turn a new leaf. If you don't want to be in their life because you can't get past it, that's your choice. But you can't constantly be accusing someone in recovery of being a drug addict and expect them to not eventually like do worse. You have to embrace the positivity, embrace the change, and help them continue to do it.
Yes, I do. I agree for sure that positive, reinforcement goes a long way. When I first got clean, my sister was the same way. She was very skeptical. She was very not trusting, understandably. She would question me all the time. And it would really bug me because I'm like, damn, dude, I have 8 months clean. Like, I've been busting my butt. How dare you not trust me yet? Like, what the heck? And then I realized, like, of course. Of course, all she has to go off of is what I've shown. So all I'm going to be able to do is show her something different. So I stopped trying to prove myself to my loved ones and just let them see through my actions that I was doing the right thing. And that's all I could do. The moment I relinquished that control, it was so freeing. And so to this person, I would say, like, I understand, wanting to have family in your life, but all you can do is show them through your actions, and you can choose how much you have them in your life and in your circle.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really hard for anyone to go no contact with family, much less people who need that support system.
Yep.
But I think it's really important at the end of the day, and yes, there are people who fall off the wagon. It is valid to be skeptical. But at the end of the day, if you're making their recovery that much more difficult, that you become the problem.
Yeah,
You should never be the reason someone falls off the wagon. You should be celebrating the growth and celebrating the progress, not just expecting the worst. Because how do you expect them to stick to this healthier lifestyle?
Right.
If even, like, you know what I mean? They shouldn't be around that mentality all the time, and if they expect to better themselves.
Right.
That's not fair.
Right. I think a healthy level of skepticism and trepidation is good in order to protect the loved one of the addict, because the last thing that person wants is to get their hopes up about having their family member back and then having their family member go back out and use.
It's one of those, like, there's no winner. Like, there's not necessarily a bad guy in the situation. There's just poor choices, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And like, even someone else sent me a story of this woman. This mom reached out to me and she said that her daughter struggled with drug addiction for years, and she sent her to rehab 4 or 5 times. And the woman is well off. She's very fortunate, and so she loves to be able to help support her kids financially. But she was finding that anytime she sent her daughter money, even after rehab, it just either went to a relapse, went to drugs, alcohol. It just became so much. So what she started doing instead was she would buy Subway gift cards.
Yeah.
And she would, I'll send you whatever, I'll pay for all your meals, you never have to pay for food ever again, but I'm not doing anything other than a Subway gift card. Like, this is the only way that I can get you to eat food, and make sure that what I'm giving you goes towards something that will help you, and you can put your bills in my name, that's fine, I will pay them directly, but I'm not handing you cash. I'm not transferring anything.
Was this girl actively using during this time?
Yeah.
I feel like the mom was a little too generous. I
Yeah.
think that in order for, this is just my opinion, but like
No,
for me,
absolutely.
it took me having nothing. It took me having nobody giving me money, nobody giving me a safe place to sleep, nobody feeding me. I had to experience
Some people do,
the
absolutely.
darkness in order to want to change. So I love that this girl's mom is willing to do all of that for her. I just know that for me, that never would have worked. Because if you're paying my bills and you're giving me food, why the hell would I stop using?
Yeah, I think it's I can see it being really hard for a mom to like give up.
Oh,
You know what I
yeah.
mean? Just to give up completely. So even though it would have probably been more beneficial for her to do that, I
Yeah.
can understand why she wouldn't be able
Let me
to.
not shame this mom, by
No,
the
no, no,
way,
no,
because
no,
this
no.
is a
There's no
person who wrote
shame.
in.
No, no, no.
Okay, good.
No, absolutely
Because you're
not.
exactly right. Like, there is such a fine line between loving and enabling.
And there's not a rule book, like there's not an instructions manual for what to do when your loved one falls into addiction. And everyone's journey is so different. Some people are able to kind of get it together a little bit easier than others. Other people really have to hit the basement of rock bottom. Everyone's different. So there's not only is there not directions or instructions,
Right.
but there's not any instructions there could be that would fit everybody.
Yeah, that's
Everyone's
true.
just kind of trying to do what they think is best. And that may or may not be what actually is best, but everyone's just trying to do what they can. Like there's
Absolutely.
not a just because someone does something out of love and it doesn't work doesn't mean it's not shame. It's not a bad person. It's just that wouldn't work for you, and that's
Yep.
totally fine.
And I've made lots of videos about enabling, and I've made lots of videos directed to the parents of addicts, because I can sit here and tell you what I needed as an addict, but as a mother, if my kid becomes an addict, it's going to be a completely different
Yeah.
story, because even as an addict, I know what to look for. I know the signs. I know that mental health is like the first thing that needs to be addressed.
Yes. Well, that's what you made me think of when you first started telling your story, but I did not want to interrupt you, is that it's so interesting because I think that generation like before us, like when you were a kid, the idea of mental health was like, oh my gosh, you need a shrink.
Yeah.
Oh, that's not real. Oh, you're depressed. Well, just go outside. Like get some vitamin D or whatever.
Right.
Like luckily in today's world, mental health is definitely more accepted and understood and acknowledged. And I think that that is really going to be a game changer when it comes to people with addiction, because in reality when you were young you had crippling anxiety, and if that was looked into and if that
Exactly.
was taken seriously or noticed and medicated in the way that it should have been,
I wonder that
right,
sometimes.
it's very possible that you would have not had that kind of spiral. You would have been taken care of and treated for that illness and that illness alone, and then you would have had the support with it. Like it's fascinating, the addiction epidemic that has occurred in the past in this country. And I don't understand how people don't see it correlated to like the decrease in addiction in modern days in the increase in mental health services, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I know that then you have like other situations where, you have the vaping, the kids don't understand what's into it. And when cigarettes first came out, people didn't actually understand what it was doing to your bodies. Like that's different.
Right.
Like, but you know what I mean?
I do know what
I
you
feel
mean.
like I'm talking in circles right
You're
now.
not at all. And I know exactly what you're saying. Things were so different when I was a kid. And that's what I think all the time is now with my kids, I know what I needed when I was younger. And so I try to give that to them. I'm like, hey, it seems like you've got a lot of big feelings going on right now.
Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it. Let's figure it out. Let's get to the root of it. Let's see if we can fix it together. I want them to get comfortable talking about their emotions and stuff, because
I love that.
I felt like I never could. I felt embarrassed to talk about my stuff. And I honestly didn't even know that it was different. I didn't know that everybody wasn't freaking out because we didn't talk about it. And yeah, it's very interesting. Mental health has become a huge priority for people, and I love it. I suffer from so many friggin' mental illnesses that have been diagnosed since. And it's like, oh, that makes sense. Why I was telling myself medicated.
It's like, that now I understand why I was freaking out.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the key, like understanding. And for the people that really hate mental health, I'm gonna just talk to them for a second.
Okay, I would love to.
Roll my eyes. I feel like the people who don't believe in therapy, don't believe in mental health, think it's all a sham. What would you rather do? humor some people and like deal with it and like actually let people take that seriously, or let your loved ones fall into that kind of dangerous addiction spiral?
Right.
What is worth it to you?
Right.
Oh, you think it's soft and weak and a sham? Okay, whatever. Let's humor you for a second. Let's say that it is. What would you rather? Have someone in your life that is, soft with mental health issues, or wanting to take their own life and wanting
Right.
to harm themselves because they're spiraling with drug addiction,
Right.
going to jail because they're struggling with drug addiction, losing all their friends and family? Like, what's the worst of two evils for you?
And with all due respect, those people who are hating on therapy probably need it more than anybody else.
Yeah, it's like the ego of, well, nothing's wrong with me. Well, something's wrong with all of us.
Yeah.
We all got something.
It's 2025, dude.
Yeah, we all got something. Like,
Yeah.
have you seen the world that we live in? We all have to have something. There's no way that we all don't. It just is what it is.
And even with what we do, like information is flying at people's faces at lightning speed.
Right, correct.
And all of it is so contradictory too, depending on what you hear. This is the diet that you do. No, this diet, this is how you lose weight. No, this way, this is how you make friends. And it's so hard to differentiate what's real and what's not. So sometimes I just shut my phone off and I ignore the world. And
Sometimes you got to do what you got to
yeah.
do. You do what you can to survive. And that, you know what? We all have to do. I love that.
I saw you looking at it. I got it yesterday.
I was about to say, like, it
It
looks.
has wrapping on it. In case anybody was looking and was like, what is that dirt on her?
Oh, I wasn't even looking at your wrist. I was looking at the design. I was like, oh, I love that.
It
That's
says
beautiful.
you belong somewhere you feel free. It's a little Tom Petty
Oh, the
lyric.
new-
That was me and my mom.
New tattoo. Did that hurt? I'm afraid of needles. Needles freak me out.
Do you not have any tattoos?
No. Even my ears pierced. I was not awake for it. I had surgery when I was itty bitty. I had like a mole right here. If you look really close, you can see the scar. In some lighting, if people look for it, they can see it in some videos. I had a big mole right under my right eye. Yeah.
Stop.
I do that when I drive
The
to
cutest thing I've ever seen.
And so I was in first grade, and so like it was obviously a pediatric surgeon, and he did like this thing to usually mostly girls, like when they went under, like, oh, would it make you feel better if I pierced your ears while you were asleep? It was like a thing that the pediatric surgeon did. So I wasn't even awake for my ears being pierced. I don't needles, like they scared me.
Wow, that's crazy.
Like it's like a big deal that I go and get my flu shot by myself.
That's cool that he did a 2-for-1.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
why if you go to get a colonoscopy, you just be like, give me a tattoo while I'm under. Then you won't even have to feel it.
Yeah, well, also my family's Jewish, so then I can't be buried in a Jewish cemetery. So it's like a
Wait, if you get a tattoo, you can't be buried in a Jewish. Shut the
yeah, it's
front
like a thing.
door.
That's like a I know that was like an old rule. I don't know if that's like still a modern rule, but like yeah.
What if you got it on your butt and nobody knew? Would the autopsy person
No
tell
one that
them?
I know personally, no one in my family wants to get one like on their thigh. And I'm like, listen, I'm not gonna say anything.
Right.
But don't come crying to me when you
Right.
get that autopsy.
When you're buried outside the fence of
Well,
the cemetery.
But 2 questions for you before we wrap up. Do you think we talked about a lot, and I value this information so much, and I love your story. Do you think there's anything specific that might be considered like a misconception that we haven't talked about when it comes to addiction or recovery or anything like that you think people just need to know about?
I think something that might be important is that also a lot of times people who become addicted aren't experiencing like internal emotional pain. Sometimes it's a normal average person who goes to the doctor to get a surgery and they get prescribed pills and then their body becomes dependent on it. And then their doctor's like, you don't need them anymore.
It's like, but I do.
And they're like, no, but my heart needs it. And
Yeah,
so I'm going
yeah.
to go to the trap house and get it. And so I think it's important to acknowledge those people also.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a completely separate issue that needs to be looked at and
Yeah.
figured out how to manage that and minimize those issues. Absolutely. There's not one size fits all reason people stumble into
Exactly.
addiction. Absolutely
And
not.
overall, I would just say that if you love somebody who is in active addiction, or if you know somebody who is in active addiction, you have to know that like all hope is not lost, and that there's no such thing as a lost cause, because I was the worst of the worst. And if me and all of my friends can overcome addiction and go on to live normal, beautiful lives, anybody can. And knowing the difference between loving and enabling that person, I think, is crucial.
I love that. That's beautiful.
Thanks.
Well, thanks so much for hanging out with me
Thank
today.
you for having me.
No, but this like I cannot put into words how excited I've been
Ah,
for this. Like it means so much to me.
that's so
For
awesome.
the I've seen things as a teacher, and I just want this to be so much more normalized. I think it's so important, and I really praise you for being able to talk about it and starting that conversation for so many people.
Thank you
So,
so much. I
absolutely.
appreciate
Yeah,
that. Thanks for having
absolutely.
me and for bringing it up so
Oh,
that
yeah.
people can be exposed to it who might not otherwise be.
Absolutely. And it's so funny because usually all my content's usually very family friendly. And I even told no, you're fine. No.
I tried so hard not to cuss.
No. My editor's really awesome, and she always beeps
Okay.
it out when people do. Like, it's totally fine. I don't
Okay.
care about that. But I even told my production company, I was like, this is going to be like a trigger warning
Dark.
episode. Like, we
Yeah.
are going to do this. Just know that if there are sponsors or anything like that, like, I am doing this though. I just need you to know. And they're like, okay. Sounds
I love
good.
it. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I hope it doesn't
No,
affect that.
no. I wanted this so badly. Like, I think it's important. It's not everything in life is sunshine and roses, and I sometimes you have to acknowledge that, and sometimes it's important to talk about it. And I would rather take the time to talk about it than if I can change the life of like one person, and I can start that conversation in one family or at one dinner table.
Yeah.
That's all that matters.
That's amazing.
That's all I care about. So, but I hope you guys were as obsessed with Tiffany as I am.
Okay. No pressure.
I seriously love it. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and we'll see y'all next week.
Bye.
Bye, my lovelies.